season of Love After Lockup is here, and I want to talk about one of the new couples, Kim and Joey. I already know this couple is going to go through a wild ride this season because I'm pretty sure Kim and Joey is a couple that I saw in the previews where Kim was freaking out because she found a needle in her bathroom after Joey got out of prison. So it looks like Joey doesn't waste no time before he goes back to his lifestyle, and he does it while they're in the middle of filming. And so let's go ahead and get into them. Kim is 38 years old. She's a teacher's aide, which is an interesting career with her dating an inmate. And she is dating 39-year-old Joey, who's locked up for breaking and entering, larceny, and identity theft. And he also has a larceny, well, one of the larceny charges was a larceny of goods and a larceny of property charge. And he is at the tail end of serving a 5.5-year prison sentence. And like I said, he's 39 years old, and he's been locked up for a total of 13 years in his life. So he has literally spent a third of his life in prison. He's probably spent more of his adult life in prison than he has outside of prison, which is a pretty major red flag, especially with the fact that he's pushing 40 and still messing up and going to prison and probably doesn't have a single thing to show that he's earned throughout his life. And Kim has actually known Joey her whole life. They went to school together and they're always friends, and she always had a crush on him, but I mean, he never really made a move on her until he finally went to prison. And then he got out of prison and literally hit her up the next day, probably trying to get some fresh out of prison booty. And she hung out with him, and then not even 100 days later, he went right back to prison again. And then I guess he ended up hitting her up in like 2020, which I don't know, it kind of tells me that he wasn't really too serious about her anyways, because I feel like even if you would have went back to prison, if you really liked her like that, then you would have tried to keep that relationship going. Why wait years later to reconnect with her? It's always a big red flag too when these girls are asked, well, what do you like about him? What's so great about your inmate? And they're talking about his swag and, oh, he must have some good D because he's got swag. If that's all that's good about him, then maybe you need to try something else out. And it's always the dudes that got all this swag that always be the dudes that be like either the biggest hoes or be like the biggest train wrecks once they do get out of prison. I mean, not every single time, but if that's all a girl's going on, then a lot of times it seems that way. And then she revealed that her father is really not a big fan of him at all. She went to go pick up a car that her father loaned to her to go pick up Joey, and even though he doesn't approve, I mean, he's still choosing to be there for his daughter. He's not like completely cutting her off or anything. And Kim has a few red flags herself. She is a serial dater. She has not been single for longer than 2 weeks since she was like a kid. She's always had to have a boyfriend in her life. She's been married 2 times and has 2 kids. And she was married to this dude, and while she's going through the divorce through this dude, literally before she was divorced from this other dude, she was already with another dude. And then once she was signing divorce papers from her second husband, she had another dude. It's always another dude she has on backup as soon as one relationship falls apart. I wish she would have went more into details about like why her marriages fell apart, like whose fault it was, and why she is moving on so quickly and trying to get married again, because she was only with Joey for 6 months before he got on one knee during a visit to the prison and decided to propose to her. And he probably proposed to her without a ring too. And of course, she was loving it. She said yes. And here's the crazy thing. This girl is engaged to a dude who her father believes stole from him. The father has a good reason not to like Joey. At first, they make it seem like he doesn't like Joey just because he's an inmate, but then later on in the episode, we learn the real reason why he's not a fan, and it's because he believes that Joey stole a dirt bike from him over 20 years ago. So apparently, Kim and her family were going out that night, and I guess Joey and his cousin were over at their house, and they left, and they said that Joey and his cousin were the only ones there that day, and the only people who knew that Kim and her family were not going to be home that night. And somebody came into the garage and stole a dirt bike, and it cost her dad over $1,600 to replace. Oh my gosh, I would have been so freaking pissed if that would have happened to me. And the father is pretty confident that it was no other than Joey, but he doesn't have the evidence to prove it. It's not like they had any cameras or anything. But all the arrows are pointing right to Joey. And Kim is so naive. She's like, oh, it can't be Joey because I asked him and he said he didn't do it. But I mean, come on, look at Joey's criminal history. He has so many different charges for different thefts and larceny charges in the past, which makes me concerned that he may be just looking at Kim as a lick. Because I mean, I'm sorry, 20 years ago, maybe he didn't have feelings for Kim back then. That was a long time ago. But I just feel like if you had, any kind of feelings, where you respected her, then you wouldn't steal from her family. No, I don't like that one bit. And the father said he's going to make sure he brings it up once he talks to Joey, once he gets out. And I'm curious to see how Joey's going to react. I really like Kim's dad, though. He seems like a guy who just genuinely loves his daughter. And he started choking up, crying, telling Kim good luck. And you can tell that, he's trying to be a dad and show his love. But you can tell deep down that he feels like his daughter can do better. When he was probably sitting there with her as a child, and you have dreams and aspirations for your kid, like who they're gonna marry and what they're gonna be when they grow up, and he never had on his list for his girl to marry an inmate, especially one that stole his freaking dirt bike. I'm sure he learned his lesson, though, and he's going to make sure he always keeps everything locked up around Joey. And here's another thing that makes Joey a major red flag. Kim was talking about, hey, I dropped about 15 racks on Joey, which I don't understand where these people on these shows get that kind of money to just blow on an inmate. But, phone calls are expensive. She says she spends $200 a week on phone calls. And that makes me think, maybe I just need to, save up my money and buy a prison, because they're making bank off these freaking phone calls. But anyways, she's like, yeah, I had to spend money on phone calls and commissary. But the thing is, she admitted that there's been multiple times that Joey got himself into trouble in prison and she had to bail him out. Which to me just tells me that he is getting himself into these drug debts and not having the money to pay them off, and then calling Kim to bail him out. Because if she's giving him commissary money, then why is he having to get commissary from anybody else? And she's paying for the phone calls, so what else would he be getting from people that he has to owe them money for? I'm thinking that he's likely using. And he's probably going to be one of those dudes that come out with a habit. I am just shocked that she's choosing to move Joey into her home with her 2 kids fresh out of prison. I feel like she definitely should have tried to give it time, especially with his history of him always getting out and then going back months later. I would have gave him time to prove himself before rushing into a home with my kids. That's just me. But that is it for this video, guys. Let me know what you guys think about Kim and Joey so far in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.